Good morning, Sarah. How are you?
Good morning. Great. How are you?
I'm awesome. I'm so happy to see your smiling face. I almost want to say finally, because
Right.
we've been talking a little while about doing this, and it's like something kind of always came up. And then a few days ago, you messaged me and you said, "All right, I'm ready to do this now more than ever." So thank you for being here. I personally am super happy and excited to hear your testimony. I know little bits and pieces of it, but I'm certain that it is going to bless everybody who listens. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. So I don't know where you want to start. If you want to start, could you actually, Sarah, give us a little to start a little taste of your ministry, where you're at on a day to day? I came across you on the internet at the maybe a year ago when I was really starting to clue into this. You were one of the first people who I saw posting weird stuff that I just didn't understand what you were talking about. Now everything you post, I'm like, oh yeah, girl, yeah. Like it's like I'm really on the same beat as you are. Because of course there's variations of what people believe, but very rarely do you post something. And then I was telling my husband that we were doing this today, and he said, I don't think we're friends on Facebook, but he said, but I see a lot of what she writes because you post it. So I love sharing your stuff because your studies are just so inspired and inspiring. So, yeah, if you want to tell us a little bit about your ministry and then
Well,
we can kind of back up.
day to day, and I'll just, I started it in 2018, about January, February. Um, and just on a whim, I started it because Yah showed me his heart. And it all goes back, and we'll get more into detail about that, about how that happened. But he showed me again, I was very secular. We were talking about that earlier before this, and I didn't know anything about God. I didn't know anything about Messiah. But later on, when I start finding out, and we'll go more into that later, I was shown that he had a heart. And I didn't know that. And so then I was shown he had emotions. I was looking in the Bible. I was led to look up the word heart in the Bible. And a lot of the places where it had heart, it would say like his heart. And I was like, oh my gosh, he has a heart. That's
And
awesome.
it's not the vision that we have, especially on the outside of all this, or even within mainstream Christianity. You don't. I
Right.
was listening to a sermon today by Matthew Jansen that spoke about exactly that, like hurting Yah's feelings,
Mhm.
he has feelings. Of course he has feelings. We were created in his image, but in
Right.
my pre these days, it was like this blob of like energy, like, oh, the universe. It was like there was not any
Right.
character. What is the character of God?
Right. And so when I was shown that, I started writing it all out. I was like, I gotta write that scripture down. I gotta write this. I gotta do this, blah, blah, blah. And by the time I got it all written out, I was just like, well, who do I tell? I mean, I didn't know anybody. I was in South Texas, in Angleton, Texas. Well, actually in Surfside, Texas, living with my parents at the time. And I was like, well, I don't know who to tell. They weren't taking it. And so I was like, I was on Facebook and I was like, and I would see other people's groups and pages. I was like, well, I could start a page and like, and then like boost my post so that everybody can see, you know what I mean? And so I did that at first. That's when I started it. I think initially it was called His Wind of Change Ministry, and it didn't really flow. So I just think I put it to Wind of Change Torah Ministry. Um, but I started everything that I wrote, I just started sharing it like daily. Like, oh, I learned about this today. Well, let me go ahead and write it on here because I thought, what if the next person didn't know he had a heart? How much joy would that person get from knowing that? Like, I had that joy that day that I learned it. And so, you know, ever since then, I just started posting. Some of it made sense, some of it didn't. Some of it was just a scripture here and there. But it began, the more I learned how to connect things. And, you know, my whole basis of the ministry is like, by the time you get done reading one of my, and a lot of the times it's long, but if by the time you're done, there should be, I try to connect everything to where there's no question. You know what I mean? Like it's almost obvious at that point, unless you're just completely blinded, like I was for many years. And so that's kind of how I got started. It was just from, and of course, I'll go through the whole testimony of really why I got started, but I do it in the morning. That's why a lot of the times you'll see my post in the morning, my bigger post in the morning. I wake up at 6, sometimes 5. Sometimes I'm on it for 3 hours before work, just putting it together, And so sometimes it takes me, I'll have oddly enough, sometimes I'll have a really good post and I'm like, well, I got to make sure the meme is good. 'Cause if the meme's not good, then it's like, I got to, because
But
sometimes I'll share a
have a
meme and it
beautiful,
doesn't, huh?
have a beautiful package. They always go
Yeah.
very nicely together. The art
Well,
is always nice.
and sometimes your memes get shadow banned depending on, and believe it or not, depending on the colors you use, depending on the size, depending on what it is. I noticed that if you use anything government wise, it gets shadow banned. So it's all these different things that go into what I do in this ministry to make sure people see it. Not so much for the likes and follows, but just so people can actually see it, read it, ask questions.
But you're not really doing it for the likes and follows, are you?
No,
Because you
no,
write
ma'am.
about stuff that people do not want to hear, is the point.
People do not
That
want to
you
hear
write
it.
about.
I get a lot of, I put my posts in a lot of Christian debate groups. Um, those are the harsher ones. I get a lot of people private message me. I get a lot of, and you see it, and probably a lot of people that are watching this or will watch this, they see it all the time. A lot of people come and defending, which is so awesome when I see that, because then I don't have to sit there and write it out. People already do it. But um, I've been called every name in the book, been called all kinds of mean names, and that's okay because it's just a lack of understanding at that point. But that's ministry though. And I consider it a ministry. I used to not, but the more people that reach out to me telling me how much it's helped them, the more I see this is a ministry. This is a ministry, no matter what. So
It's a blessing. Thank you so much.
yes, ma'am.
So you said 2018 was when you felt like you needed to share that Yah has a heart. Just before that, like certainly you didn't just wake up one day, or maybe you did. Maybe you woke up one day and that was your no.
No, I mean, well, I feel like kind of one day I just woke up and you'll understand that in a minute. But I mean, I'll just take it back and I'll be quick about it. But starting at childhood, very secular home. My mom and dad, she's a non-practicing Catholic. He doesn't believe in God. And so we were raised secular. Here in America, it's like, you're born, you pick a religion, but not like, you're just in name, right? Oh, I'm a Baptist, Methodist, I'm Catholic, but just usually in name. You pick a political side and that's it. You're an American, right? And that's how it is here. From what I see, I'm 44 now, and that's what I've seen. And so, you know, my parents were very much Democrat, so I knew that much about them. But anyway, so I grew up very secular. I had a lot of things happen in my childhood. I was molested as a child, and I know, gosh, so many of us are back then. It's so sad, but I was. And this was a close family member, somebody inside my home. And so I I was going through that middle school. I was very tormented. Now looking back, I see that I was tormented by a demon. In middle school specifically, I had what I guess doctors would dub Tourette syndrome. Um, I don't do that and I don't have that problem anymore. But at that specific time, I was struggling with that. And when I look back, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I was tormented by a demon back then. That was crazy. But I was made fun of for that. So it was just a lot of different, I was bullied growing up. Um, and you know, it just things that I never dealt with back then until I guess later on in life. But sorry. And I think my parents took me to a psychiatrist one time, but I think whatever I told the psychiatrist they didn't like, and then they took me back out. So just different things. And so as a kid, I think God was trying to speak to me because my mom's best friend would take me to vacation Bible school at her Baptist church. And they wanted to baptize me, and I wanted to. I was like, yeah, this sounds great, like God and Jesus. And I kind of believed at that time, like just from going to that vacation Bible school. My mom got mad at her best friend because she's not Catholic. So she shut that down real quick. But I can see back then where God was just trying, And I remember as a child, we lived right down the street from a Catholic church. We did. And I remember one Easter, again, secular, we did Easter, Christmas, and all of them. But I knew that Easter, well, I don't believe that now, but I knew back then that Easter was about Jesus. And I was like, I want to go down to the church today. My mom got so mad at me. I don't know why. She did not want me going down there. And finally, she yelled and screamed. She goes, you can just do what you want. So I walked down there. I went to church as a kid. I was like, I'm going to church today. I went down there. I cried. I felt God. Of course, it kind of went away, growing up. I was a kid. But I can just see where God was just really trying and just everything was working against me. Again, grew up after I went to a Catholic high school where I learned about all kinds of religions. After that, I went to the Marine Corps, drank heavily, um, and got out. And that's when I met my first husband, had two babies. And I just shared this testimony the other day. I committed adultery on him and had another kid. And so just all these different things. I was living wildly after that divorce. I tried to stay with, because when I committed adultery, I had a baby with another man. And so I tried to stay with that man. That didn't work out. He was an alcoholic. That just didn't work out. And then finally I met this other guy. I mean, I felt like Satan was leading me at that point. And he was an abuser. He abused me. He eventually sexually molested my children and all these different things. And so that was a whole thing. Lost my two girls in a custody battle because of all that. And it was a lot. I did leave him. We did go to court over it. Of course, it's his first offense, so he got off pretty decently. I hope he repents. And that's what I pray for people like that. I don't pray for them to go to hell. I pray that they repent and that I see them on the other side of this, because that's what y'all would want, right? But anyway, so I, me and my kids have a lot of PTSD from this. And so you can see where the doorways have opened for me and my kids all these years. And I got into drugs while with this abuser. That's another one of my testimonies. I was a drug user for a long time. Me and my brother used together, and you know, I liked it because it clouded everything. It felt like I was in another reality, and so I was like, "This, yeah, I'll do this every day. This is great." But it's not, because I really see how a lot of people say that that's sorcery. I can see that. And so, but finally, oh, and it's funny because I wrote out my whole testimony this morning on paper. And the one thing I forgot to mention in there is that I did go to rehab in 2014, I believe. I went to rehab and learned some things in there, got out. And I came out, I left the abuser, moved in with my parents, and this has all fallen into place. I know it's a little long, but
No,
moved in with my
you're fast forwarding through it like a champion. I feel like I'm watching it on double speed here.
right. And I'm kind of looking down at my paper too. And while I was with my abuser, before I moved down there, I did the drugs. But another thing that I did to cope with what I was going through is that I didn't really believe in God, but I wanted to believe in something. I wanted, I was so lonely. I felt like I couldn't leave. And that's a whole nother thing, with abuse and women, and even vice versa. It's hard to leave, but it's that psychological warfare, I believe. But so um, I started trying to talk to the dead. I started ghost hunting. We call it ghost hunting in the secular world. And so I started doing that. I started going to graveyards while I was with the abuser. I started going to graveyards, recording, press playback, ask questions. And eventually eventually I started hearing something. And that's why I say demons are real, because I started communicating with this thing. And I didn't really start communicating until after I left the abuser, after I came out of rehab, I started really communicating with this thing. And uh and right before I moved in with my parents, I was in Houston, Texas, in the house that I grew up in with me and my boys. And that's when everything, that is the point in my life where I went from thinking a certain way to my whole reality busted open. It's it would be like if you turned on a scary movie. Like, I know growing up I used to watch like The Exorcist and all those crazy movies. That's what it was like. And I continued to talk to this thing, and this was 2015 to 16 is when I really started communicating with this thing. And I had a friend at the time who, looking back, actually looking back, his dad was Torah observant, but I didn't know what all that stuff meant back then. That's so funny how God put us on that path. But and he was also my using buddy a long time ago, so that's even funnier. But he told me this was December, and keep in mind I was still ghost hunting, still popping sleeping pills left and right. And he told me, he goes, Sarah, December 2016, he goes, Sarah, I really need you to do me a favor. And because we were still talking back then. And I was like, okay. He goes, I really want you to watch this video. And I was like, well, what video is it? He goes, well, it's 3 hours long. I was like, what video is it, Brandon? And so he goes, well, it's called Identity Crisis by Jim Staley. And I was like, who's this person? And
Yeah.
so he goes, if you were ever my friend, because believe me, even though he was a using buddy back then, he was kind of my, you know, I, he knew all the things that I was going through, you know what I mean? And so he was the friend that I talked to. And so he's like, if you ever loved me as a friend, as whatever, he goes, you'd watch this video. It's only 3 hours. Actually, it's 2 hours and 50 something minutes. And so I was like, okay. And so he sent it to me, and I went to a Catholic high school. I told you. So I did. They issued a Bible in that school. So that's the only Bible I had in the house. So if anybody has ever watched Jim Staley, you know that he's a little charismatic, which is great, because when he starts that video, you're reeled in, and the first 5 minutes, you're like, yeah, 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 yeah. Let me go get my Bible. Like, I gotta see what he's talking about. And so, because the one thing he said in the video was, if you can sit through a 2 hour movie, I was like, I can sit through a 2 hour movie. Okay, I'm going to sit through this right now. You've convinced me, Jim Staley. And so I did. And by the end of that video, I was like, that's awesome. I was like, and so I believe,
That's incredible to hear, Sarah. Do you know, I only watched half of it. Believe it or not, I fell asleep during the middle of that 2 or 3 weeks ago. I had never
yeah,
even heard of it. It's a different time that you came into this versus me. Like, that's
yep,
old school teachers. You know what I
it
mean?
is. Yeah. And like, now looking back today, when I watch it, I'm like, yeah, there's a couple things that I probably don't agree with, but for the most part, it's on target. But and so December 2016 is when a mustard seed was planted, because I was like, wow, there really could be a Messiah. Like, could be a Messiah. That was my mustard seed. Well, in the background, I was still ghost hunting. I was still communicating with the dead. And a couple months later, in February 22nd is my birthday, the day I was born 44 years ago. And that was the first time I heard this voice or voices out of the recording. Now we're talking about, I heard it through the recording, and now I'm hearing it outside of it. And it ain't just voices, Miss Jenny. I'm talking about, I seen things move in front of me. Well, that night of my birthday, I mean, if my son were here, he could probably help me tell the story. He was there. It was like a scary movie. The TV was unplugged, but was going kind of off and on. I'm not kidding. This stuff was happening. Things were happening. My son claims to have seen that demon face in the window. It was not good. That night, that thing was tormenting us so bad that my little boy, he's now in 10th grade, and this was in 2017. So kind of do the math. That's how old my youngest was, pretty young. young enough not to sit there and lie about things, but he was like going to sleep on and off on my bed. And he was like waking up, freaking out because he was seeing demons in his head. It was a terrible night. And that's when all my tormenting started to happen, was when I started, but I'd still try to communicate with it. But it just kept getting worse. I was being shaken awake at night. Um,
When you say it, like I don't have those kind of experiences to look
yeah.
back. I have some weird stuff. It was one entity, like was did it have a personality
Well,
in terms
it
of
did.
oh,
And I believe it or not, I still hear it. And I know a lot of people, just like the other day, they were like, well, you have the authority to cast it out. I'm like, yeah, I know I do. I know. It's been 8 years, I know. But for whatever reason, this thorn on my side is still here. And but so I don't know how it works, right? Like I know I don't think they work as one, but I've always kind of known it as one. And I remember one night laying there in that time frame, and I had the sheets over my face, and the sheets would lift up and drop. And then at one time, this happened one time, that thing, and that's not even in my testimony, but that thing, my sheets was over me, and that thing put his face right here, and you could just feel it, and it was just kind of screaming at me, and you could feel it bumping my face. And I was like, this can't be happening. None of this is happening. I must be going crazy, but it was happening. It was happening. So the reality that I thought was reality wasn't reality anymore. Now everything just opened up in my life. Like there's there's a spiritual side to these things. And I was tormented until the spring of 2017. I was tormented so bad that I ran down to the Catholic church, the one that I was trying to go to when I was little. And I ran inside and I found a priest and I was like, you got to help me. I have a demon tormenting me. I live right down there, right there. Please, please come down there with me and please help me. He didn't believe a word I was saying. He didn't do anything. He didn't even pray over me. He didn't do nothing. He just like, well, I just can't help you. And I'm like, and I told him, I was like, but you're a priest. Like, I I know what priests do on TV. They're supposed to cast them out. I know what you're supposed to do. And very secular I was back then. But so I ended up going back home and I ended up like burying these coins around the house because that's what I read online. I tried everything. Well, finally I did reach out to another Catholic priest in downtown Houston. And this guy was sent by God. I know some will say, well, he's Catholic. He couldn't have been. Well, actually, he was because he believed every word I said. He prayed with me, held my hand. He told me that I was basically a child of God and that, you know, he even printed out prayers for me to take home. He was there for me. Like God knew exactly what that man was supposed to do. And he hooked me up with this couple that were like deliverance ministry, and no, they didn't deliver the demon per se. They didn't, cast it out and I started doing all these things. They taught me what it was to sin. And it's very basic. Like they taught me that because I think they were probably Catholic too. So they taught me the 10 Commandments. You can't break those. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't commit adultery. They taught me how to forgive others. They taught me to get out my notebook, write everything down that I've done wrong that I could remember when I was a child, then write everything that people has done wrong to me and forgive them. Like go down the list. I mean, they taught me all of those things. So they started my path basically. And so I started doing that. And that's when I moved in with my parents. And they were alcoholic. They're not alcoholics anymore, but they were back then. And the devil was just, every day I'd wake up and study the Bible. That was the time where I started that ministry. It was just, you know, and actually my parents believed me about the voices because she hears voices too and had heard voices in the Houston house. She told me, she's like, yeah, I've heard voices too there. And I was like, well, at least I know I'm not crazy. And so I'm glad they believe me, regardless of what they believe in God. I'm glad that at least my parents believed me at the time. But it was just terrible for those 6 months living there. They were alcoholics. I was trying to serve Yah with my kids. The first year that I didn't want to do Halloween, my mom told me I was a terrible parent. I was doing a disservice to my own children. And I was like, well, that's your opinion. And I'm going to do me still, like, and what led me to give up Halloween is that I had just came out of Deuteronomy and it said witchcraft was a sin. That October, I walked into the store and saw a witch decoration for Halloween. And I was like, oh, I get it. Okay. All right. Okay. I'm not doing this anymore. And so, just that's when I started my ministry. And I still hear the voice, you know, and it's just amazing because I'm not saying if you do God's will, he's going to give you things. That's not what I'm saying. But he does bless you. When I moved to in with my parents, I found a job as a hairstylist because I have my cosmetology license. And I did that. And I diligently did that. I ministered to some of my clients. The lady that hired me, she swore that I was sent from God to her, which I thought that was interesting at the time. And and but in the back of my head, I was thinking like, what else does Yah have in store for me? Yes, I can continue to do this, but what else? Because there was a lot of vanity that goes into what I did for a living, a lot of making women look sexy, a lot of, you know, getting too close to the males, touching their beards, just things that I would eventually be uncomfortable with. And so, not that that's a sin. So don't get me wrong. Don't think that I'm saying that being a hairstylist is a sin. It's just I had a feeling there was something more. And so I would say I wouldn't say the prayers. I just was thinking like, Yah knows my heart. Like I feel like there's something else that I should be doing. And so during that time as a hairstylist, I was single for about 6 years and just me and my boys because the girls were living with their dads and they would come over every other weekend. 2020, the thing happened that everybody knows about. And I had to come out of the salon because they shut my salon down. Not my salon, but they shut the salon down. So I started this little teasy tassel ministry. I wanted to make tassels for all the believers. I had just come into this, so I really wanted to do it. But I didn't want to charge anybody, so I did it for free. A lot of people would donate to it, so I'd be able to do it. And so, and during all of that time, God had me like pray for a husband, not pray to get a husband, but pray for my husband. I didn't even have a husband. I didn't even have a husband. But I was very led to say prayers like, Yah, please heal my husband so that, eventually we can both be ready for each other. I said this prayer so many times and I'd wake up and look at the other side of the bed, it'd be empty. And I'm just like, one day, I think that there's somebody out there and I don't know who this is, but I'm already praying for them. And well, you know, so I continued to do hair and I was doing hair for this guy and he asked me out on a date. And this was 2020. And I was like, okay, yeah, his was just a normal Christian, and I thought he was real cute. So that kind of just, oh, you're cute. Let's go on a date. And so I did. Well, we went on 2 dates. It went pretty good. Just real casual, nothing, no kiss, no holding hands, nothing like that. But I liked him a whole lot and I thought he liked me, but he ghosted me for 2 weeks or more. And that upset me. I'm a girl. So I was just like, I can't believe he did that. Well, just to find out that he was talking to some other girl. And so that made me even more upset because I was like, you could have just told me. And so we eventually met up at a park. And this is actually leading to somewhere, but we met up at a park. And I really just wanted to hit him because I was like, you're mean, I can't believe you did that. But I told him, I was like, he said he was sorry. And I told him, I was like, listen, from what I've learned in this walk so far is we should forgive each other. I said, so listen, I forgive you and we can continue to be friends and we don't have to let this destroy a friendship, what friendship we have, you know what I mean? And so right after all that happened, about a week later, I think it was about a week later, he texted me and he goes, hey, Sarah, you looking for a job? I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, we have an opening here for an assistant director over at Education Employment Department. It's an organization where we house homeless veterans. And I was like, he goes, I think you'd be a shoo-in because I'm also a veteran. I served in the Marine Corps. And so I was like, how much does it pay? Because I'm not making hardly anything as a hairstylist. And it was like triple what I was making. And I was like, okay. But see, had I have not forgiven him, I probably wouldn't have gotten that phone call. See how that works? See how forgiveness, it does bring a blessing. So I didn't even really get interviewed for it. I went down there, talked to them, I was hired. I mean, just like that, I was hired. I started maybe a week later. Um, I've been there for 4.5 years. And in that time, Yah has blessed me enough to where I've now gotten my associate's degree while I was there for business management technology, which is not just any degree, it's a degree that helps me do my job now because of, I believe, because of diligence and me building myself up at this organization that I still work at. You know, I tried so hard there to serve like the veterans, they're homeless veterans. It's a residential facility. It's called the Warriors Refuge. It's based out of West Columbia, Texas. Awesome organization. And, you know, I eventually, well, I will say this before I tell you that part, I got to bring in my now husband into the story because that plays a big part in where we're at now, living out here in East Texas. So during that time of those 2 dates with that guy, right before that, I had made a prayer. It's on Facebook, actually. I will find it and tag you in the comments. There's a prayer that I put out, and I prayed that, and I thought it was a cute prayer. That's why I put it on Facebook. I don't typically just put prayers on Facebook, but this one was awesome. And I prayed that Yah would bring me a handsome Hebrew man, Torah observant, but not in any way. I need it to be in a way to where I knew it was from Yah, right? Very specific. So I prayed, and this is when I was still at the salon. I prayed that Yah would bring me a handsome Hebrew man wearing tzitzit, walk in my salon, and greet me with shalom. And that's going to be the man that I marry. Well, in this prayer, somewhere in there, there was something about a duck, about my next husband's going to buy me a duck. I love ducks. I don't have any yet. I have chickens, but so remember that tzitzit ministry I was telling you about? Well, there was a guy on Facebook who decided to email me and say, hey, man, not hey, man. He said, hey, sister, I want some. Can you please make me some tzitzits? I was like, yeah, sure. So they were free, but he sent me money anyway. And I sent him his tzitzits. Well, a few months later, the same man messages me. He goes, Sarah, you know, that's cool that you live like in the Lake Jackson area. He goes, that's where my parents are. He goes, and this Thanksgiving, I'm going to go visit them. Can you do a beard trim and a haircut? I was like, well, yeah, that's cool, man. I can meet another believer. That's awesome. Okay. So so we scheduled it, and all in the background, that other guy and the dates were going on. Do you see how Satan comes in and just tries to whittle his way? And so that day, this man comes in, handsome man with a beard, wearing the tzitzits that I made him. He had it's almost crazy, but he had a stuffed duck in his hand, and he greeted me with shalom. And that's my husband. And he actually walked me through that whole thing with the guy I was seeing for a couple times. He walked me through that because I kind of vented to him because when we met, we were just friends. We hung out a few times, James and I, my husband now. And fast forward a few months, and it was like we we hit it off. I mean, it was just like it was meant to be. He came across that post. I forgot about that post. I did. And I came across it. He actually came across it, and he goes, oh my gosh. He goes, you prayed for this. He didn't even know. Like, he didn't know.
Why
And
did
he,
he bring a duck? Why did he just show up with a duck?
well, now I do think he may have known something about that because that duck wasn't really part of that prayer. So the duck thing was, I think I had I don't know where I put it out on Facebook. I have to look for it. Something about, I don't know if it was in a comment section, something about my husband, something about a duck. So he knew I liked ducks, is what it was. The whole thing of that, he knew I liked ducks, so he wanted to buy me a duck. It's a little mallard. We named him Moshe, and it quacked when you squeezed it.
And
And
that was how he arrived at your salon.
that's how he arrived at my salon. And so we got together, and you know, 4.5 years later, I mean, of course, just like any marriage, ups and downs, which is great because it builds us up. But he ran across that prayer post, and he's like, Sarah, that's confirmation for me. I've never seen that post before. Not in that regard, you know what I mean? Not like the whole walking into a salon, greeting me with shalom, the teasies, the very teasies that I made the man, of all things, you know. He could have worn any teasies that day, but he wore the ones that I made for him. But so it's just, and just I got that new job right as him and I started seeing each other. So it was like everything was just taking a turn. And all the meanwhile, I mean, I still hear the demons, that's still in the background. But and I'm just trying to look at some of the stuff that I wrote, but like, you know, he was very supportive of the job that I got. He was very supportive of the ministry that I run. That was one of the things that he said uh that he thought was awesome when he first saw me on Facebook. He's like, everything you wrote, he's like, it was just awesome. So he wanted to meet me, not in the way to date me, just that he just wanted to meet me. And it just so happened that he was going to be in town and I do hair. He needed a haircut. So, now with this job that I have, so to wrap it around, to circle it around, we've been together. And one of the things that him and I share is that we both wanted to move to acreage. We both wanted property. That was one of my prayers when I first moved to South Texas or very South Texas I even told my boys, I was like, one day I want a house on land. There's posts on Facebook about it, several of them. And when I met my husband, he was working at a place in Austin and he worked remotely. I wasn't working remotely at the time, but one day, the day before, we were going to buy a house in South Texas, and it was just in a city. And we were going to buy, and we were about to close on the house. We were going to go to Garner State Park in mid Texas to do Sukkot, to go camp for a week. And we were going to come back and we were going to sign on that house. The day before we left to Sukkot, we get a phone call. My husband gets a phone call. He goes out to his RV, and HR called him, and they laid him off. He comes back in. He goes, Sarah, I just got laid off. We can't get that house. And I started crying and bawling. And we did go to Sukkot, but we couldn't buy the house. And so, with that being said, he had some money in the 401k that he took out because he was laid off. And so, instead of keeping it, he decided, like, maybe we should invest it, right? And so we sat on it and we're looking at property. But the only thing about it was like, and I'm trying to get the story straight, but like our credits were messed up. Like there was things on my credit and we both had to use our credit. Well, he eventually found another job, right? And like this job that he found, he had it for a few months. So he found the job, which then we were able to go and find a piece of land because you can't find a piece of land without him having a job, right? So he found this job. We found a piece of land and we had that money from his layoff from that 401k. We found the piece of land. We put money on it. And in that time frame, I had gotten all my credit worked out, blah, blah, blah. And then as soon as we closed on that property, he gets laid off again. And you tell me how that ain't God coming in. And that time frame of him and all these things, and God blessed us with property. If it wouldn't have been for the layoff, he wouldn't have got the 401k. If it wouldn't have been for that job that he was with 5 or 6 months, we wouldn't even got the land because how couldn't he with it? All these things and we just kept being diligent. Not that we're perfect. We just kept saying, we're just going to keep trucking. And so by the time we put money down on it and got it, he got laid off. We were like, okay, we trust you. You know what you're doing. Like, I mean, And then I thought, well, what am I going to do about my job? I don't work remote, right? Well, I had put so much work into my job that like this organization runs on a lot of grants and things like that. And so I wrote three of the grants in that role. So I put together a proposal for the board and asked them, you know, how about this? I don't want to quit my job, but how about if you let me work remote and I'll be the grant compliance officer? I'll write all your grants, I'll manage them. I already know what I'm doing, and they approved it. They approved that position for me to come stay out here in East Texas, live on my property, do the things, the gardening, the chickens, and everything else while I work remotely, helping out this organization for homeless veterans. Like, if that's not Yah, I really don't know what is. And that's what I mean by he does bless you. Not that you do it for the blessings, because I would have never thought that all these things would be happening in my life. I was a drug addict back then. I was somebody that was very much into my sexual sins, all these different things. I was an adulterer. I was a thief. I stole things back then from people that I knew, people I lived with, just, random things and all these things. And Yah said, I can use you, I can use what you've torn up in your life. I can use that for his benefit, for my benefit, as far as my benefit, meaning like if I straighten myself up, it's going to help my children. It's going, you know what I mean? That's what I mean by that. And in all that, in all of that, my girls weren't living with me. And that was a big thing because we had like at least 3 custody battles. And when my daughter turned 17, that's still not the legal age to make your choice on where you want to live here in America. You have to be 18. Well, my other daughter had already moved in with me. She turned 18 and had me pick her up on the day of her birthday. And I did. My daughter was 17 or just about to be 17. And I was praying for God to unharden my ex-husband's heart because he loathes me, and I get it. There's no forgiveness there, and I understand that too. But I kept asking him to unharden his heart for my daughter to come live with me. And I remember my daughter and I went to go pick her up that spring when she was about to turn 17. And or no, we dropped her off is what it was. It was a Sunday, we dropped her off. It was my weekend, we dropped her off. We were gonna come back home. And on the way back home, I got down the street a little ways and I messaged him. I was like, you know, I'd have to go back and look at what I even said. I don't even remember what I said, girl. I don't even know what it was that I told him. But he messaged back, he goes, just turn around and pick her up. Do you remember when God unhardened the Pharaoh's heart? That girl, the same God that unhardened the Pharaoh's heart, unhardened my ex-husband's heart that day. And it was for a specific time. It was like for about less than 30 minutes. Because when he told me I can go get her, me and my daughter were like, oh my gosh. We turned around. She packed whatever she could. She jumped in the car and I told him, I see, that's what I'm saying. There's a God. I mean, if you knew my ex, I'm
I
not
I
saying,
relate enough to you in various ways that I appreciate the humor of that 30-minute window that you had.
yep, it was 30 minutes. And all I could think about was the Pharaoh's heart. I was like, it's like as if he was a Pharaoh. It's like he let my daughter free, you know what I mean? Because they wanted to move back in with me. They were older, it was time. Back then he did the right thing. He took them out of a crazy home, which is good. But eventually they wanted to come back home. I was doing great.
So now, Sarah, now you're who's at home with you guys now?
So my oldest daughter moved out with some friends. Unfortunately, we kind of don't see eye to eye on some things. She reminds me a lot of me when I was growing up. But I do have my other three still, my 14-year-old, 17-year-old, and actually he's about to be 18. And then now my 20-year-old who just left for work, they're living with me now. Um, I've been raising them in this for 8 years. I'm not saying there's not a lot of questions there because I do not homeschool. I know I should, but I don't, and that's okay. But so they hear a lot of things from school. So they have questions. My oldest daughter, I mean, I'm oldest, my other daughter that lives here.
That's the silver lining. My kids go to Sarah, you and I have so much in common. It's actually frightening a little bit with some. And for me, I just turn it into talking points. They go to
Yep.
public art school, very liberal public art school. They come home with all kinds of stories. We laugh about it. And the
Yeah.
reality is we're all still living in Babylon, like we just are. So how can
You know,
how can they bring their light to the people around them?
so one of our convictions, and we may see different on this, and that's okay. But one of our convictions had this conviction in 2019, I believe it was um was the American flag and how kids would stand up and pledge their allegiance to this flag. And so I told my kids, I learned about it. I actually wrote about it on Facebook. Again, it's not for the likes or follows because believe me when I say I was torn down for that post. And I told them, I was like, I don't want y'all standing up for that anymore. I was like, you stay your butt seated and we don't pledge our allegiance to anybody but the Father. So please don't commit that idolatry. And they were little back then. So I talked to the school. They were fine with it. I think a couple times some of the teachers gave them a hard time, but I squared it away. Well, the other day, my son, who's in 10th grade, it's a new school year, new teachers, and he didn't stand up for the pledge. And she embarrassed him in front of the class, told him he needed to get out, needed to go to the principal. The principal said that he could stay seated. Obviously, it goes against your rights as an American. You're allowed to not participate in these things, quite frankly. And so she he goes back into the class. She still embarrasses him, said that, well, my husband, was a veteran and he fought, so you can sit your butts in those seats and blah, blah, blah. So he made a statement. Even some of the kids were mad at him for not standing up, but you know how proud of him I was because he's now, you know, 15. Um, and that was him making that choice. That wasn't him, because he could have standed up. Because I'm not there to see what he does. He could stand up, if he chose to do that, but he didn't because he hasn't for the last years. And so I had to go up to the school and have the principal sign something to say that your teacher is breaking many laws. Anyway, it was a thing, but I was really proud of him, though. You know what I mean? So they are learning some things. They're constantly, in the back of me, you see kind of there's a couple of bar stools over there, and a lot of the times my sons will come up there while I'm cooking and they'll ask me questions. Not every day, but sometimes they'll get it in them to start asking me like, well, hey, what about this or what about that? Or my son came up to me, do you know what, Mom? There's this guy at schools to read out of the book of Enoch. I was like, that's cool. Y'all start talking about it, and just different things. So it's not a sin to put your kid in public school. Had I have done it all over again, I probably would have homeschooled them, but we're dealt the cards that we're dealt with right now. I have to continue to work. I know people would probably say, "Oh, you're not trusting God." Maybe not. Hey, maybe my faith does need to raise, but for now, this is what it is. Um, and and I like the fact that he didn't stand up and kids saw him. You know what I mean? Kids saw him do that because I think it's important. And a lot of people probably asked him, "Why'd you do that?" And my Damien is not scared to tell you what's on his mind. He'll tell you, no, that's an idol. Well, he doesn't care. He'll just tell you. So, it's important, I think, too, to be lights even in the public schools.
Amen. That's thank you. I don't feel guilty. I mean, I'm also in my kids are living in two homes right now. They go back and forth in two different cities.
Right.
I live 60 miles north of where they go to school. So when I have them, I drive a lot. Um, I'm not on the same page as my ex-husband in any way, shape, or form. We're
Right.
living two very different worlds. And yeah, thank you. I just find that very, very affirming that you're in a similar space of, like you said, we
And
cards that we're dealt with. And I just choose to see the positive part of it, the conversations that can come between our
right.
teenagers and the people around them. And um,
And and because of that happened last week, I went to talk to the principal and I was able to tell him why we don't stand up for the pledge. I told him about Yeshua. I told him, I was like, I'm not going to get into huge detail, but I told him, I was like, there's specific things we don't do. We don't do Christmas, Easter, Halloween. We do the feast days in the Bible. I said, no, we're not Jewish. I said, but we do Bible things in Bible ways. And, I was trying to explain to him and he was all for it. He's like, oh, no, you guys explain to me. But but I was able to talk about the word when if it didn't happen, it would have been talked about. So, it happened for a reason.
I think it's
So,
awesome. I'm feeling so inspired, and I think there is this tendency because we know we're meant to be set apart to isolate, and like I just don't have any I don't even live with my husband. My husband lives in another country. Like I'm on my,
right.
I have a few friends that kind of stayed around. I have one friend that is remaining after the whole church fiasco that happened, but I'm virtually on my own. And yeah, I think it's very, very easy for us to isolate because we just in a lot of ways just can't relate to anybody in the outside world anymore, whether it's
Right.
what people watch or do. Or I sat down at a restaurant the other day, and like you just hear the F bombs coming. Like these people are just having a
Okay.
conversation in there. And I'm like every time I'm in the world or in public, I actually feel a little bit anxious now because I just don't fit. I feel like an alien. So
Right.
I think for the kids in some ways, you always hear about the weird Christian homeschooled kids. And like I know some normal homeschooled kids, but there is that risk of being so isolated that they just can't relate to anybody anymore.
Right. No, I completely understand that. And I think that's what, you know, and I think and even with my kids now, it's kind of a struggle because they're, have questions and, you know, there were more about it back then, but now, even besides school, just in public or, it's just we're basically followers of the way. I mean, you go and jump in the ocean, get caught in a rip current, right? And that's what it is. You're fighting that rip current that's pulling you back. You're fighting that. That's what it is to fight ideologies of the world. And it's like it's like when you go out to your garden, like mine right now, I'm using that because every other week I'm having to, and I should be every week, I'm having to go out there and tear out the weeds. And it's like an ongoing battle. Like, and if you don't do it one week, it's like this big the next week. And eventually it's like, oh my gosh, you've overtaken all my plants and the plants die. And it's a good analogy. You have to keep on. We're learning a lot of different spiritual aspects here on the farm, on this, I won't call it a farm. It's getting there though, but on this homestead, it's like, I just grew a garden for the first time and planted the seeds and that, we bought some heirloom seeds and I didn't even think they would grow. I'm like, how does that little carrot seed grow? Or like if you ever saw a catnip seed, they're so little. But now my catnip plant is like that big. It's like I had to have faith even in the seeds that I planted. So and that kind of correlates to you got whenever you do plant seeds spiritually, have faith that it's going to sprout. You know what I mean?
Amen.
So yeah, it's a lot. That's kind of my life in a nutshell. I'm sure I left some things out, but it's just been wild. I'm only 44. It's been pretty wild. The whole spiritual warfare thing is, I'm glad it happened. I'm not glad that I sinned for it to happen, but I'm glad that y'all allowed it to happen in that way because I felt like I was a very one of the hard cookies to crumble, hard cases to crack, I guess. And he's probably like, well, if you don't believe it, then here you go.
But I think too, those of us, we go through really tough stuff in order to then be able to help other people. And I think that's why, in terms of ministries, this is what I feel is what I'm called to do, is to help other people share their testimonies, because, people can relate to what you just shared in a way that they won't be able to relate to somebody else's testimony. And,
Right.
we're
And
not
right. And I got, and there's a lot of things we're all gonna differ on. There are hills that I will die on. And I will, certain aspects of, you know, what the Bible says and what prophecy says and um but at the end of the day, like I just put out a post about Sukkot. Somebody said, well, you're not supposed to use a tent that way. And I'm like, well,
I
we're
totally
all
saw
learning.
that, and you were so graceful in your response. I was so annoyed. I,
Yeah,
I
well,
and you were so generous with how I just thought it was a beautiful example of actually following the Messiah. Do you know, I think we're talking about the same comment. You just
yeah, we probably are. But I guess one of the things I learned in this ministry is how to handle people that come against you all the time. I know y'all see it all the time. And one thing I learned the other day is that God told me, I'm not gonna say he audibly told me, but I felt like he was saying, was Sarah, don't defend yourself. That's prideful. You don't need to defend yourself. Everything's written in the word. You don't need to defend yourself. Just put facts down there. You know, that's why when I do put my opinion, I'm like, this is Sarah's opinion. Kind of like with Paul, this is Paul's opinion. You know, this is not what the God says, but this is what I say. What opinions are fine, and we just have to decipher. But it's one of the things is like on that one comment, I was like, yeah, but how do you do it? Like,
I know.
okay, it's wrong, but do you have any advice? Because maybe I can learn something from it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, we
Maybe we
can.
can build it the way it's supposed to be built. You know what I mean? Just different things, but we're all trying. I mean, we're in Babylon. I mean, that's, you know, when I first came, the first year I started following the Torah through Messiah, I mean, we did Christmas that year just because, I mean, I was like, oh man, this is going to be a great Christmas because Christmas is about Jesus. And I got all my kids little crosses and things like that. But Yah knew my heart and he knew what I was trying to do. Whenever I ran down to the Catholic Church so that he can expel that demon, I flopped myself right in front of a Jesus statue and was just like bowing down to it because that's what I thought I was supposed to do. But Yah knew what I was doing. He knew, and so he straightened me out.
And like you said, though, that Catholic priest that did inevitably help you,
Right.
you need to not be so hard on the Christian people around us who are also learning, hopefully, because not all of them are learning. Most probably
Well, and
care.
there's a healthy difference between, I've met people on this walk that are doing it the wrong way, and then you try to help them, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I see what you're saying. Well, let me change that," because that's what I've done. I'm like, "Oh man, yeah, I see what you're saying." I'll give you an example. This church that I used to go to, keep in mind, I knew nothing about ideologies. I didn't know nothing. So I was wearing this tank top that I got from Walmart when I first came into this, and it had little skulls on it. And looking back, they were Day of the Dead skulls. I didn't know that. I just thought they were cute skulls with little pink things around it, right? And so, and I know everybody watching are going to be like, how did you not know that? Well, you don't. You don't know what you know until you know it, period. I don't care who you are. And after the sermon or whatever, this guy comes up to me and he goes, hey, Sarah, he goes, why did you wear that shirt today? And he was just asking me, and I told him, and he goes, do you know what that shirt is? I was like, well, no. And he told me. I was like, really? And he goes, yeah. Well, at first I was thinking like, oh, but then I went home and I was like, I just threw the shirt away. I was like, he's right. Like it's a pagan shirt. I was like, I need to throw this away. So there's people that mess up, but they want to do the right thing. That's why it's important to help people in their discipleship, you know, Um, because, and it's not that you're judging them, it's that, hey, maybe you didn't know this, and if they feel judged, that's not on you. You know what I mean? And of course, presentation is key. You don't want to beat somebody over the head, like, this whole divorce and remarriage thing, you don't want to beat people up, um, you just want to come at, even if what you're saying is wrong, present it in a way, even if, like the women that came at me for the divorce or remarriage, it was pretty harsh. Why don't you just lovingly tell me? Why does it got to be, how dare you? You're sending people to hell. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's presentation is everything. I'm sure Messiah presented in a way to where, I know he flipped tables, but he didn't go around flipping tables. That was a one-time ordeal. You know what I mean? That was him making a stance. But I believe that Messiah presented in a way to where, it wasn't such a condemnation type of thing. But I don't know.
Love this. I'm starting to see it more. Like, again, I'm new here, but I've seen so much bad behavior from so many mean people that you understand why everyone in the Torah community is a terrorist. Like,
Right.
that's the picture that's painted by a few bad apples. You know what I mean? And I'm starting to see now a few people, a few women coming with heart and softness. And like, it's not in my nature necessarily to be super, I don't know how to describe it. Like, some of us are firecrackers, you know?
Right.
I'm starting to find around me some softness of framing things in the way of being that light and not coming. I had a pastor one time at the church I was going to. He died recently in this freak accident
Oh no.
with paint fumes, and he died. He passed out face down in a swimming pool, and anyway, it was very sudden. I had a few interactions with him. Rob is his name. He's an American pastor who came up here and I think implanted some of the Protestant churches. And I think he had been watching me on Facebook before, like I was going hard for Jesus, before I was going hard for Torah, I was going hard for Jesus. And he had done a sermon about, he had a hammer and a salt shaker on stage. And he said, you can either be the salt of the earth
Right.
and come in with a hammer. And I really appreciated it because I was definitely at a time in my life where I was kind of clobbering the
Right.
this or the new age people around me, like, no, you got to stop doing this, stop doing it now.
Right.
He stopped me and I hardly knew him, but he had been obviously watching me on Facebook and he's like, Jenny, he's like, you really got to just take the salt shaker from me. He's like, you can't come in with the hammer all the time. And he wasn't wrong, and I definitely, like a lot of us, came in, especially to this Torah path with so much, like I often say, like a bull in a china shop or whatever that expression is, where people just want so desperately to share the truth, right?
Right.
All of that to say that I'm starting to see, and I do see it with your posts and that response that you had, is this tenderness of being able to show the truth without coming off as a terrorist, because we've all had people come at us,
Right.
even from within the community, of whether it's remarriage and divorce or whether it's sending your kids to school or head
Right.
covering. Head covering's a big one, and you and I think, again, is a place that we're on the same page, as we cover
Right.
essentially full time, but we're not going to condemn people who have not been convinced to
Right.
cover.
Exactly. Exactly. Because the way I see it is that sometimes when we're condemning in that way, like if I walk up to somebody who's uncovered and who may see something differently, they could possibly have more faith than even me. We don't know. You know what I mean? There's so many, you know, the Bible says, God used a donkey. So, I mean, you can learn from just about anything, everything, I don't know why he used this donkey, but hey, I don't make the rules. And so, you know, it's like I said, presentation is key. If you can just go back to Galatians 5:22 through 23, or maybe a little further than that, like that's how we should be reacting, you know, and maybe not right away. Back when I had to, and I won't go into detail, but back when I had to reply to a message months ago, I had a rebuke from somebody and I had to reply to that message. I had to wait. I had to wait 24 hours. I even told my husband, I was like, I gotta wait. I can't do this, or I'm just gonna be like, how dare you? You know what I mean? Like, And that's the thing, like the father's still working on me. I may be nice on Facebook, but in my head, I'm like, well, you jerk. You know what I mean? So it's like it starts
I,
from here, and I still have so much to work on.
I think that that is the fruit of the spirit, right? It's not that we get baptized and we come out of the water and we're all of a sudden a perfect person. It's that in time we have some
Right,
self-control of not responding that thing right away. And then maybe in a little bit more time, you
right,
have that reaction. But it's normal to react defensively if you're, especially if you're constantly being called out for stuff. But can you not respond immediately and then wait until you have something a little bit more gentle to say after you've maybe forgiven the person for, calling you whatever name they did?
right.
Mhm.
And I mean, that's just it. And even so, even when you have to come in and possibly correct somebody, if that ever comes about in somebody's lives, I mean, that's a big one too. Um, and that's even harder because then you got Satan playing in your ear. Should you do that? Like sometimes you have to. I got to correct my kids all the time. It's not easy either. I don't like my kids being mad at me. To me, to me, correcting my kids when it comes to biblical things, to me, that's practice because it's all the time. And they get mad at me for a second, but I'm like, hey, it is what it is. I mean, sometimes you got to be that person. It's not always fun.
Mm. Thank you so much, Sarah. I think that's a natural place to sign off, and I'm so happy that we got the time to sit down together, and I got
Too.
story and just fascinated by this wild and wonderful ghost hunting thing that is way bigger in the States than it is up here for whatever reason, TV shows and stuff like that. Just get a sneak peek of all of the things that brought you to where you are and how you're able to help so many people who are just coming to, like I said, your posts were some of the first I stumbled on. And I remember I messaged you a few days before I was getting married. I just had a wedding 2 days ago, 3 days ago. But Jesse and I had actually gotten married
Right.
in January. And I remember messaging her, I'm like, am I really supposed to be wearing tassels as a woman? I don't know if you remember that,
I do.
because it was just something that I had kind of put, it just wasn't on my radar, and I don't know if you
Right.
did something and I was like, oh, wait a minute. But anyway, just to say that you were one of the first people back in whenever it was, a year and a half ago, that was posting. um yeah, your posts were mysterious, and I think that that's great. Once somebody sees enough mysterious posts, now your posts are inspiring, and they don't puzzle me ever. So I think that I don't think you've changed anything. I just think that I've gained understanding in the last year or so, and
Yes, ma'am.
that they'll continue to bless the people who know what's going on, and to inspire the people who are just cluing in and start to be like, okay, what's this about? Because they're
Right.
not aggressive and they're not mean, they're palatable, and they're true. They're not soft and fluffy and sugar coated. They're true, but they're not mean. And neither are you.
Thank you. I mean, I can't. That's the old me. That's the old. We all could be mean. We're all capable,
Yeah.
but we should.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sarah. Have a great rest of your day.
Yes, ma'am. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. We'll see you again very soon.
Okay. Bye bye.